What if I told you that a man revered as a moral compass in his community, a pastor whose words could soothe the souls of many, harbored secrets so profound and dark that they could only be uncovered by the cold, hard truth of DNA? This isn't just any story, it's the tale of Samuel Pacilius, a pastor in Victorville, California, whose life was a tapestry woven with threads of faith, charity, and an unblemished reputation. Yet, beneath this carefully crafted image, a narrative of betrayal and deceit was silently growing, a secret so shocking that it would challenge everything his community believed about him. Imagine a man, whose daily acts of kindness were not just a part of his ministry but an integral part of his identity, suddenly entangled in a plot where his own daughter's love interest becomes the target of a murder-for-hire scheme. This isn't just a story of crime, it's a saga of how the sins of the past, hidden by time and silence, can resurface to alter destinies. The threads of this story are pulled together by the undeniable science of DNA, revealing a family history steeped in darkness, a history that Samuel Pacilius could never have anticipated would come to light in such a dramatic fashion. This is the journey into the heart of a man whose life was seemingly dedicated to light, only to reveal shadows so deep, they threatened to eclipse everything he stood for. This is where faith meets fate, where the sanctity of the church meets the harsh reality of human nature, where the truth, buried under years of respect and admiration, emerges to challenge the very essence of trust and belief. Samuel Pacilius was not just another pastor, he was a pillar of the Victorville community, his church, Grace of Dawn, a beacon for those seeking solace or guidance. Born in California, he grew up with a strong faith, shaped by his parents who were both devout and involved in local charity work. His journey from a young man with a calling to a respected spiritual leader was one of dedication and service. His sermons were known not only for their passion but for their ability to connect with the congregation, addressing their fears, hopes, and the complexities of modern life with a wisdom that seemed beyond his years. Grace of Dawn wasn't just a church, it was a community center where Pacilius organized food drives, youth programs, and even counseling sessions, making him a beloved figure. His reputation was spotless, his name synonymous with integrity, his life an open book, or so it seemed. Family was paramount to Pacilius. He had married young, to a woman named Elena, who shared his vision for a life of service. Together, they raised 2 children, with their daughter, Emily, becoming the center of their world. Emily was the joy of the Pacilius household, growing up in the shadow of her father's church, her life intertwined with the community's fabric. She was bright, compassionate, much like her father, and as she grew, she brought into the family circle a young man named Daniel, her boyfriend. Daniel was an outsider, not from Victorville but from a nearby town, bringing with him a different perspective and a background that, while not affluent, was filled with ambition. Daniel and Emily's relationship was one of those that seemed to fit perfectly into the narrative of young love, often seen at church events, volunteering together, their laughter echoing through the halls of Grace of Dawn. Samuel welcomed Daniel into the family, seeing in him a reflection of his own youthful zeal, or so he portrayed. But beneath this picture-perfect scenario, tensions were simmering. Samuel, behind his supportive facade, harbored reservations about Daniel, perhaps seeing in him traits or a past that he feared could disrupt the harmony he had built. His concerns were never voiced in public, but in private, they cast a shadow over his interactions with Daniel. This relationship, so integral to the Pacilius family dynamic, would soon become the epicenter of a storm no one could have predicted. For while Samuel Pacilius was busy shaping his community's spiritual life, forces were at work that would reveal a side of him, and his lineage, that was far from the sanctity he preached. On an evening that would forever change the course of many lives, Daniel, Emily's boyfriend, found himself at the center of a meticulously planned attack. It was a cold, clear night in Victorville, the kind where the silence is only broken by the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant hum of traffic from the highway. Daniel had just left Grace of Dawn after helping with the evening's youth group session, his mind on the simple pleasure of a quiet drive home. But as he walked towards his car, parked in the church lot where shadows play tricks on the eyes, he was oblivious to the danger that awaited him. The plan was executed with chilling precision. Two men, strangers to Victorville, had been hired for this grim task. They were not just any criminals, they were professionals in the darker arts of crime, their names unknown, their faces hidden behind the anonymity of masks. They had arrived in town days before, under the guise of tourists, scouting the area, observing Daniel's routines. Their surveillance was thorough, noting the times he left the church, his favorite routes home, and even the make and model of his car, a silver Honda Accord that stood out in the church lot. Payment for this dark deed was arranged through untraceable means, a series of transactions that would confuse even the most seasoned investigator. It was a cash exchange, handed over in a nondescript parking lot, far from prying eyes, the money coming from an account linked to Samuel Pasilius, though through so many layers of financial obfuscation, it would take time to unravel. The night of the attack, one hitman played the lookout, his eyes scanning the area for any unexpected witnesses, while the other approached Daniel from behind as he unlocked his car. The plan was to make it look like a random mugging gone wrong, but the intent was clear: elimination. However, something went awry. Perhaps it was the unexpected presence of a late-night churchgoer, or maybe it was Daniel's quick reflexes, but the attack did not go as planned. Daniel managed to fight back, his screams for help echoing into the night, alerting nearby residents. The assailants, realizing the element of surprise was lost, fled the scene, leaving behind a shaken but alive Daniel. In the aftermath, the parking lot became a crime scene, littered with the remnants of a violent encounter, scattered belongings, a dropped knife, and the chilling realization that this was no random act. This was a targeted hit, the first unraveling thread of a sinister plot that would lead back to Samuel Pasilius, revealing layers of deceit and a betrayal so profound it would shatter the illusion of sanctity around Grace of Dawn. The police involvement began almost immediately after the failed attack on Daniel. The sounds of struggle and his calls for help had not gone unnoticed. Residents, disturbed by the commotion, called 911, prompting a swift response from the Victorville Police Department. Officers arrived to find Daniel, visibly shaken, recounting his encounter with what he believed were two would-be robbers. But the nature of the attack, the fact that it occurred in the church parking lot, and the signs of premeditation suggested something far more sinister. Detective Maria Ruiz, who had seen her share of violent crimes but none quite like this one in such a community setting, took the lead. Her first task was to secure the crime scene, where forensic teams began collecting evidence: the knife, footprints, and any potential DNA. A key piece of evidence was a partial license plate number Daniel managed to note from the hitman's getaway car, providing a crucial lead. As the investigation unfolded, several clues began to point toward Samuel Pasilius. The first was the money trail. Financial records, once subpoenaed, revealed a series of transactions from Pasilius' accounts to shell companies and then to individuals known to have ties to organized crime. The pattern of these transfers, all occurring in the weeks leading up to the attack, was too coincidental to ignore. The discovery of the hitmen came next. Through the partial license plate, police traced the vehicle to a rental company in Los Angeles, where security footage captured two men dropping off the car a day after the attack, their faces obscured but their movements identifiable. A nationwide alert for these men led to their apprehension in a sting operation at a bus station in Phoenix, where they were attempting to flee the state. Upon interrogation, these men, under the promise of lighter sentences, began to talk, leading back to the person who had contacted them, a man fitting Pasilius' description. Community tips also played a significant role. Whispers within the church community about Pasilius' unusual behavior in recent months, his sudden financial generosity, his tense interactions with Daniel, and his secretive phone calls, began to surface. A church elder, who had witnessed Pasilius' odd behavior with cash, came forward, providing one of the most damning pieces of circumstantial evidence. Surveillance around Pasilius intensified. His phone records, once legally obtained, showed calls to unknown numbers that matched the timing of the hitman's activities in Victorville. And then there was the surveillance footage from a local ATM, capturing Pasilius withdrawing large sums of cash, the same cash believed to have funded the hit. Each piece of evidence, while seemingly circumstantial on its own, when pieced together, painted a disturbing picture of a pastor orchestrating a murder for hire. The investigation, now with enough leads to warrant further action, moved from gathering evidence to preparing for confrontation. The once respected pastor was now the primary suspect in a crime that shook the very foundation of his community's trust. As the investigation into Samuel Pacilius deepened, the need for concrete, irrefutable evidence became paramount. The crime scene, particularly the struggle that had taken place, had left behind more than just physical clues. There was biological evidence as well. A strand of hair, some skin under Daniel's fingernails, and a blood drop on a piece of clothing left behind by the attackers all pointed towards the use of DNA to solve this puzzle. Detective Ruiz, knowing the potential of DNA in this case, ordered forensic analysis on these samples. The results were swift and clear. The DNA from the crime scene matched Samuel Pacilius. This revelation alone was enough to solidify the case against him, but what followed was something no one could have anticipated. When Pacilius' DNA was entered into the national database for cross-referencing, not only did it confirm his presence at the crime scene, but it also triggered an unexpected match with an old, unsolved case. This case, dating back to when Pacilius was just a child, involved a brutal crime in a different part of California, a crime that had remained cold for decades, a double homicide where the perpetrator had never been caught. The DNA match revealed that the suspect in that old case was none other than Pacilius' biological father, a man who had vanished from Pacilius' life when he was very young. This man, once thought to be just a drifter or perhaps dead, had left behind a legacy of violence that had now, through his son's DNA, been brought to light. This discovery wasn't just about linking Pacilius to the attack on Daniel, it opened a Pandora's box about his family history. The father, whose name was now known to be Vincent Pacilius, had a criminal record that stretched across states, involving theft, assault, and now, thanks to this DNA match, murder. The investigation into Samuel Pacilius' life took an unexpected turn into his past, exploring how the sins of the father might have influenced the son. Interviews with distant relatives, who had kept silent out of fear or shame, revealed stories of Vincent's volatile nature, his sudden disappearances, and the dark cloud he cast over the family. Some whispered about his involvement in organized crime, others about his temper, but all agreed on one thing: Vincent Pacilius was not the kind of man one would want to emulate. The DNA evidence, therefore, did more than just connect Samuel Pacilius to the crime, it unearthed a family secret that had been buried for decades. This revelation added a layer of complexity to the case, suggesting that perhaps the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or maybe it was the pressure of living under such a shadow that led Samuel down this path. The narrative of the investigation, now intertwined with this shocking familial revelation, painted Samuel Pacilius not just as a suspect in an attempted murder but as a character in a much larger, darker story of legacy and betrayal. The revelation that Samuel Pacilius' father, Vincent Pacilius, was not only a criminal but potentially a murderer, cast long shadows over Samuel's life narrative. This wasn't just about connecting dots in a criminal investigation, it was about understanding the psychological and moral inheritance that might have been passed down through generations. Vincent Pacilius had vanished from Samuel's life when he was just a toddler, leaving behind a void filled with stories of a man who was more myth than reality. His mother, left to raise Samuel alone, spoke little of his father, always with a hint of fear or sorrow in her eyes. The narrative within the Pacilius family was one of moving forward, leaving the past behind, but now, that past had caught up in the most dramatic and public of ways. The crimes Vincent was linked to through DNA were not just petty thefts or minor assaults, they included a double homicide where the brutality shocked even seasoned investigators. This case, unsolved for decades, had left a community in perpetual mourning and a young Samuel with a legacy he might never have known about if not for the investigation into his own actions. Psychologically, the impact of such a revelation on Samuel could be profound. Growing up without a father, he might have idolized or demonized the image of Vincent in his mind, shaping his own identity either in opposition or in unconscious mimicry. The pressure to be the antithesis of his father could have led Samuel to embrace his role as a pastor with such fervor, seeking redemption for a family name tainted by crime. Or, the shadow of his father's deeds might have instilled in him a belief in his own invincibility or a sense of entitlement to judge others' morality, perhaps leading to his own criminal acts under the guise of protecting his daughter from what he perceived as another bad influence. The discovery of this family secret might also explain Samuel's secretive behavior, his sudden wealth, and his association with unsavory characters. Perhaps, in his mind, he was trying to right the wrongs of his father, to control or rectify the legacy left behind. Or it could be a darker inheritance, where the line between right and wrong blurred under the weight of genetic predisposition and learned behavior. This revelation forced a re-evaluation of Samuel's life choices, his motivations, and his moral compass. Was his involvement in the crime against Daniel an act of desperation, fear, or a continuation of his father's legacy? Did he see himself as the protector of his family, or was he following a path laid out by genetics and environment? The psychological insights into Samuel's behavior suggest a complex interplay between nature and nurture, where the secrets of his father might have shaped him in ways he didn't even recognize. The shock of learning about his father's criminal past through such a public and dramatic investigation could also lead to introspection, guilt, or even a breakdown of his carefully constructed persona. This aspect of the story, the uncovering of Vincent Pasilia's criminal history, not only added layers to the case against Samuel but also provided a narrative of how deeply family secrets can affect personal behavior, decisions, and ultimately, one's fate. The community, once looking up to Samuel, now had to grapple with these revelations, questioning how much of one's path is chosen and how much is inherited. Samuel Pasilias, once the epitome of community virtue, now stood at the center of a narrative far removed from the pulpit. His character, shaped by years of service and the silent weight of his father's legacy, revealed layers of complexity that begged understanding. His motivations for orchestrating an attack on Daniel were not straightforward, woven instead from a tapestry of fear, protection, and perhaps, a dark inheritance. Disapproval of Daniel was clear but multifaceted. On the surface, Samuel might have seen in Daniel echoes of his own father's unsavory past, perhaps a young man with ambition but from a background that didn't align with the image Samuel had crafted for his daughter's future. This disapproval might have been fueled by a paternal instinct to shield Emily from what he perceived as a repeat of history, where love led to chaos or worse, criminality. But beneath this paternal concern, there could have been deeper, more personal motivations. Fear for his daughter's safety, yes, but also fear for his own legacy. After learning about his father's crimes, Samuel might have seen Daniel not just as a potential threat to Emily but as a threat to the reputation he had spent his life building. He might have feared that Daniel's presence in the family could unravel the facade of sanctity he had maintained, exposing him to the same scrutiny that now surrounded him. The psychological strain of carrying such a dark family secret might have led Samuel to extreme measures. Was this an act of protection or an attempt to control the narrative of his family's history? Experts in criminal psychology, consulted during the investigation, suggested that individuals with a known criminal family background often struggle with identity, sometimes acting out in ways that either defy or fulfill their inherited roles. Interviews with community members painted a picture of a man torn between two worlds. Friends from his church spoke of his kindness, his dedication, but also noted subtle changes in his demeanor in recent months, perhaps the weight of his father's legacy finally taking its toll. An old friend from Samuel's youth, now a psychologist, remarked on how Samuel had always strived to be the opposite of what he imagined his father to be, yet here he was, entangled in crime. Family friends, those who knew Samuel before his rise as a pastor, shared stories of a young man who was both haunted and driven by the absence of his father. They spoke of his early determination to serve, to heal, but also of moments where he exhibited a controlling nature, especially concerning his family. This could suggest a man who, in his quest to create a perfect family environment, resorted to extreme measures to eliminate perceived threats. The narrative of Samuel Pacilius thus evolved from one of a spiritual leader to a complex figure whose actions might have been influenced by a mix of love, fear, legacy, and perhaps, an unconscious desire to confront or continue his father's criminal heritage. This exploration of his character revealed not just a criminal but a man shaped by the very secrets he sought to bury, offering a glimpse into how deeply one's upbringing and family history can influence life choices, even those as grave as plotting a murder. The community, once united under his guidance, now found themselves grappling with these revelations, discussing not just the crime but the man behind the mask of piety, questioning how well they knew him, and what parts of his actions were chosen versus inherited. The trial of Samuel Pacilius was not just a legal proceeding but a spectacle that captured the attention of the entire region. Held in the San Bernardino County Superior Court, the case promised to peel back the layers of one of the most shocking betrayals in recent memory. From the outset, the courtroom was packed, with media outlets vying for every detail of this fallen pastor's story. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Laura Simmons, began by laying out a meticulous case against Pacilius. The cornerstone of their argument was the DNA evidence linking him directly to the crime scene, supported by the financial trail leading from his accounts to those of the hired hitmen. They presented bank statements, ATM surveillance footage, and phone records, painting a picture of premeditated crime. Witnesses for the prosecution included the hitmen themselves, whose testimonies, though given in exchange for reduced sentences, were damning. They described meeting with a man matching Pacilius' description, discussing the plan to attack Daniel, and receiving payment. Their accounts, while self-serving, were backed by circumstantial evidence like the partial license plate and the timing of their movements. Daniel, now more than just a victim, took the stand, recounting the night of the attack with vivid detail, describing his struggle, the fear, and his identification of Pacilius' voice from previous interactions. His testimony was emotional, resonating with the jury as he described the betrayal not just by a potential father-in-law but by a community leader. The defense, helmed by attorney Michael Grant, argued for reasonable doubt, focusing on Pacilius' character and the lack of direct evidence tying him to the act of hiring the hitmen beyond financial transactions which could have other explanations. They brought in character witnesses from the church, who spoke of Pacilius' lifelong dedication to his faith and community service, suggesting that such a man could not have committed such an act. A critical moment came when the defense introduced the concept of Pacilius being set up or manipulated, perhaps by individuals from his father's criminal past seeking revenge or leverage. This theory, while speculative, introduced a shadow of doubt, particularly when they brought in an expert on financial crimes who explained how easily one's identity could be stolen or accounts hijacked. The trial had several turning points where the outcome seemed uncertain. One was the testimony of a former church member, now disenchanted, who claimed to have overheard Pacilius discussing dealing with Daniel, though this was hearsay and lacked concrete context. Another pivotal moment was when the prosecution introduced a recorded phone call between Pacilius and one of the hitmen, discussing payment and the need for discretion, a conversation that seemed to seal his fate. However, the defense countered with psychological testimony, arguing that Pacilius might have been under such stress from his father's legacy and the pressure of maintaining his image that he might have acted out of character or been framed. This narrative, while not exonerating, offered enough doubt to make the jury deliberate longer than expected. As the trial neared its end, the courtroom was thick with tension. Would the jury believe in the fall from grace of a pastor, or would they see a man caught in a web of deception not entirely of his own making? The evidence was compelling, but the character of Samuel Pacilius and the specter of his father's sins loomed large, making the trial's outcome anything but predictable until the very end. The trial of Samuel Pacilius became a media circus, with national outlets joining local news in covering what had quickly escalated from a local crime to a story of moral corruption, family secrets, and the fall of a respected figure. The local community of Victorville, once a place where Pacilius was seen as a beacon of hope, found itself at the epicenter of national attention, grappling with a mix of shock, betrayal, and introspection. The initial reaction from the community was one of disbelief. Those who had attended Grace of Dawn, who had been comforted by Pacilius' sermons, struggled with the duality of the man they knew versus the one described in the courtroom. Vigils turned into debates, and church services, when they resumed, were marked by a palpable tension, with many congregants questioning their faith in both man and institution. Local newspapers like the Victorville Daily Press ran headlines that oscillated between the crime itself and the deeper narrative of Basilia's family history. Pastor's dark legacy, from pulpit to prison, was a common theme, reflecting the community's struggle to reconcile their pastor's public persona with his alleged criminal actions. National media, including networks like CNN and Fox News, delved into the story, not just for the crime but for what it represented about trust, morality, and the influence of one's lineage. They brought in experts on criminal psychology and religious studies to dissect how someone like Basilia's could lead a dual life. The story was sensationalized, with some outlets focusing more on the dramatic elements than the factual nuances, leading to debates about media ethics and sensationalism. Social media was ablaze with opinions, from those defending Basilia's, citing his good deeds and suggesting a conspiracy, to others who felt betrayed, sharing personal anecdotes of his influence in their lives now tainted by doubt. Hashtags like #Basilia's trial and #darklegacy trended, turning the case into a public discourse on morality, faith, and the nature of evil. The revelation of Basilia's father's criminal history added a layer of fascination and horror to the coverage. National talk shows and true crime podcasts picked up the story, exploring the psychological implications of inheriting a criminal legacy, how it might shape one's life, and whether Basilia's was a victim of his genes or his choices. This narrative intrigued the public, leading to discussions about nature versus nurture, the secrets families keep, and how far one might go to protect or redeem a family name. The coverage also sparked a broader conversation about trust in religious leaders, with some communities using the case as a cautionary tale for oversight and accountability within religious organizations. Faith-based publications and blogs debated the implications for the church at large, questioning how such a scandal could be prevented in the future. Through all this, the community of Victorville was in a state of flux, with some members feeling the need to distance themselves from Grace of Dawn, while others rallied around the church, defending its mission if not its former leader. Bookstores saw an uptick in sales of true crime and memoirs by children of criminals, reflecting a public hunger to understand or perhaps find solace in stories of redemption or caution. The blend of shock from the crime and the revelation of the Basilia's family's dark past created a narrative that was both deeply local and universally resonant, challenging everyone involved to reconsider the complexities of human nature, the masks we wear, and the legacies we leave behind. After weeks of testimony, evidence, and public scrutiny, the jury in the trial of Samuel Basilia's reached a verdict that would close one chapter but open many others. On a tense afternoon, in a courtroom that had become all too familiar to the residents of Victorville, the jury returned with their decision. Samuel Basilia's was found guilty on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. The gasp that ran through the courtroom was a mix of relief for some, heartbreak for others, and for many, a somber acknowledgement of the truth they had been forced to confront. The sentencing was swift, following just days later. Judge Helen Martinez, known for her stern but fair rulings, sentenced Basilia's to 25 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving a significant portion of his sentence. Her words during the sentencing were poignant, reflecting on the betrayal not just of trust but of the very values Basilia's had preached. She highlighted the gravity of using one's position of power to orchestrate such a crime, emphasizing the impact on the community, the church, and his family. For Grace of Dawn and its congregation, the verdict was a turning point. The church, once a place of solace, now had to navigate the painful process of healing and rebuilding trust. Attendance dwindled initially, with many congregants feeling lost, questioning their faith in human leadership if not in their spiritual beliefs. However, a new pastor was appointed, one who openly addressed the scandal, focusing on transparency, community, and the lessons to be learned from such a fall from grace. Over time, the church began to recover, though the shadow of Basilia's actions lingered, a cautionary tale. For Basilia's family, the aftermath was devastating. Emily, his daughter, found herself at the center of unwanted attention, her relationship with Daniel now under the microscope of public opinion. The couple decided to leave Victorville, seeking a fresh start away from the scrutiny and the memories of the church parking lot incident. Emily's journey was one of personal healing, wrestling with the dual legacy of her father's actions and her grandfather's dark past, questioning how much of one's path is predetermined by family. The revelation of Vincent Pasilia's criminal history, brought to light through his son's DNA, had broader implications. It reopened old wounds for those connected to his crimes, offering some measure of closure but also reigniting grief. For the Pasilia's family, it was a stark reminder of how secrets can shape generations, with researchers and psychologists citing this case in studies on the long-term effects of family secrets and criminal legacies. The legacy of Samuel Pasilias was now irrevocably altered. From a respected pastor to a convicted felon, his story would be told in true crime circles, in books, and perhaps one day, in documentaries. His actions, driven by a complex mix of motives, painted a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the weight of familial legacy, and the human capacity for both good and evil. The community of Victorville, while moving forward, would always carry this episode as part of its history. The church would rebuild, new leaders would emerge, but the story of Samuel Pasilias would serve as a reminder of the complexities of human nature, the shadows cast by family secrets, and the enduring quest for redemption or at least, understanding. The case of Samuel Pasilias transcended beyond the courtroom, igniting a firestorm of debate around privacy, the ethics of DNA usage in criminal investigations, and the profound psychological impact of uncovering family secrets. The application of DNA testing in this case underscored the double-edged sword of genetic privacy. While DNA was instrumental in linking Pasilias to the crime scene and, more unexpectedly, connecting him to his father's criminal past, it raised significant concerns about the extent to which one's genetic information can be used. The public began to question the implications of submitting DNA to databases, whether for ancestry or health, and how this data could be accessed by law enforcement without explicit consent. This case became a pivotal point in discussions about the need for stricter regulations on genetic data, prompting some to call for laws that would prevent such familial searches without a warrant or stronger protections for genetic privacy. The ethics of familial DNA searches came under scrutiny as well. The technique of using a relative's DNA to catch criminals not directly linked by their own DNA in the database was both lauded for solving cold cases and criticized for its potential to invade privacy. Legal scholars and ethicists debated the morality of implicating relatives in investigations, arguing that while it might bring justice, it also risks stigmatizing or unfairly targeting families based on genetics rather than action. This debate touched on broader themes of genetic determinism, challenging society to reflect on whether we should be judged by our DNA or our deeds. Psychologically, the revelation of Pasilia's father's criminal history through DNA had a ripple effect far beyond the immediate family. The concept of genetic haunting became a topic of discussion in psychological circles, exploring how the knowledge of such a legacy can affect an individual's identity, mental health, and decision-making. For Samuel, this could have been a catalyst for his actions, a subconscious or conscious battle with his lineage, prompting questions about how much of our behavior is influenced by the knowledge of our genetic past. For those who learn of dark secrets in their family tree, the psychological impact can be profound. Feelings of shame, guilt by association, or the pressure to either defy or live up to that legacy can lead to identity crises or mental health issues. This case brought to light the need for support systems, counseling, or even specialized therapy for individuals dealing with such revelations, recognizing that the burden of family secrets can be as heavy as any physical inheritance. The broader societal reflection included a re-evaluation of how we view criminality and redemption. Pasilia's story was a stark reminder that no one is beyond the reach of their past or their genetics, yet it also posed the question of whether one's actions should define them eternally. It sparked conversations on second chances, the possibility of rehabilitation, and the societal role in fostering environments where individuals are not doomed to repeat their family's history. In the end, the case of Samuel Pacilius was not just about crime and punishment but about the intersection of science, ethics, and human psychology. It forced a look into the mirror of society, prompting discussions on privacy, justice, and the very essence of what it means to be shaped by, but not bound to, one's lineage. If you're as shocked by these events as we are, hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime stories. What do you think drove Samuel to such lengths? Was it fear, a misguided attempt at protection, or the weight of his father's legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's delve into the complexities of human nature together. In the end, the story of Samuel Pacilius from Victorville, California, is not just a tale of crime but a profound exploration into the depths of human nature and the shadows cast by family secrets. A pastor, admired for his dedication to faith and community, was revealed to have orchestrated a murder-for-hire plot, driven by a mix of motives that included fear for his daughter's future, disapproval of her boyfriend, and perhaps, the dark legacy of his own father's criminal past. This case laid bare the complexities of identity, morality, and the lengths one might go to preserve or alter one's legacy. It highlighted the power of DNA in both solving crimes and uncovering family histories, sparking debates on privacy, ethics, and the psychological burden of inherited secrets. Through this narrative, we've seen how the veneer of respectability can mask deep-seated fears and inherited flaws, how the past can dictate the present in ways we might not even recognize, and how justice, when served, often leaves more questions than answers. The Pacilius case is a reminder that each of us is a product of our lineage, our choices, and the secrets we keep or uncover. If you found this story as compelling as we did, check out our video on From Playmate to Prey, the dark tale of a beauty queen's end, where we explore another tale of betrayal and redemption. And don't forget to leave your theories or questions below. Your insights help us understand these complex human stories better, and together, we continue to unravel the mysteries of human behavior and the secrets that shape our lives.